New Zealander, you have quite a number of different things that you do. In Germany, you are just a composer or just a pianist who does only music of the years of, let's say, 1970 to 1985 or whatever. That you have a much more refined and small label that you follow, that is your particular niche. In New Zealand, you do everything, you do anything. And I found that along with teaching children, I was teaching very young children and teaching a lot more sophisticated players who would go on to become fine pianists all over the world. And one of the things that I was particularly concerned with was that we didn't have enough piano music for my young pianists to have New Zealand music to play. There was very little. Now, Douglas had one or two pieces, grades 3-ish onwards, and one or two other New Zealanders had done a few pieces here and there. There was nothing, no great body of it, and it was very hard to find music for very young, very simple children, young children who were by no means advanced, who were, grade naught-ish, not grade 1, grade 2, but, real beginners. I really felt the lack of this, and I hunted and found about half a dozen different composers who'd done each, one work, like David Griffiths with his little insect pieces and so on, but not really things that I could give to many of my students. And yet at the same time, there were other New Zealanders, performers, thinking that we need New Zealand music. Competition societies were beginning to ask for a New Zealand piece, but there weren't any. There were, some of the Lilburn pieces, and basically that's what people played when they had to do a New Zealand piece. And so I and a couple of other people, and this happened quite by chance that we bumped into each other and decided to put together some way of getting New Zealand pieces. And this was with the Huttons, David Hutton, who's an accountant of some enormous cleverness, and Heather Hutton, and two or three other people around. And I was the composer. There was music teachers, piano teachers, and performers. We sent out a call for New Zealand composers to write for the piano for children, and we didn't commission people to write pieces, which we could have done, but then we would have been bound to have those pieces published, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to be able to choose from a body of pieces what we thought we could teach best and what our children would enjoy. And so began the Sunrise pieces, and Sunrise was really, really a fabulous project, and we got about a couple of hundred pieces from composers over all of New Zealand, and we chose, there's just half a dozen of us, we chose the pieces that we liked best and that we really wanted to have our children play. Now, I had, on the last day before this process finished of bringing in scores, I decided I really have to do this. And I wrote, just on one afternoon, I wrote 11 pieces, just short little children's pieces, on various different ideas of the kinds of things that I'd like my young students to have. And then there were no names on any of these things. It was all done blind. And so out of 200 pieces, the first 11 chosen were my pieces, which was really nice. And then we chose about 50 other pieces. We had about 60 pieces altogether. And that was really very special. Because that had got me thinking about how I could write for my students and to fulfill that place inside me that said, you really want to compose, you really want to compose, you really, really want to compose, but I hadn't been able to make myself, after so long, get and do something. It made me do something because I was making everybody else do something. We probably sent out a call to you to say, give us some New Zealand piano pieces. And so Sunrise was a good success, a great success, and it's still being used, and this is about 10 years later, I don't know how many years it's been, and it's still being bought and played all over the country, and it broke all publication records for New Zealand pieces. That has sold thousands. So that was a very exciting project. So 2 years later, we were looking at this whole thing. If we finished at grade 3, we needed a book that goes from grade 3 to grade 6. And we put out a call again, and there was a huge take-up because everybody had heard, all the New Zealand composers had heard about Sunrise, and everybody wanted to send us pieces. So we had a huge number of pieces. We must have got 500 instead of 200. There was a lot there, and we realised we were going to have to make a bigger book because it was very hard to say, yes, we'll have this and we won't have that, because the quality, the standard of writing was so much higher. And it was really successful. And that's where Jigs to the Ghost of Gershwin comes from. Because again, about not one day before the call closed, but a week or two before, because it takes a lot to push me into these things. And I wrote 5 pieces. And the interesting thing was that Gillian Whitehead wrote 5 pieces. And Gillian and I have sort of done parallels of each other. She's gone in a totally different direction, but we began about the same time. She's a year or two older than me only. But we began doing similar things very, very early on, and then went in different directions. But here we were coming back again, and writing these children's piano pieces. She wrote so fascinating set, mostly about animals or scenes, country scenes. So she was living in central Otago at the time, and she wrote about the river, and she wrote about little birds and quail and stuff. And I wrote about, well, in the first book it had been mostly little birds. And in the second one, I wrote a piece which was intended initially as a processional for my niece's wedding, and very favourite niece on a very special occasion, and so that one I sort of tidied up and entered into it, and so it went on. And one of them was Jigs to the Ghost of Gershwin. Now, I'd been fascinated with Gershwin's music, and I turned a lot of Gershwin pieces, my favourite little snips to play on the piano, I turned back to front. So where Gershwin went da-da-da-da-da, I went da-da-da-da-da, actually used some of his chords and ideas, but backwards. And so this is the Ghost of Gershwin, because the music is backwards and upside down, and yet still uses recognisable Gershwin chords. And then Jigs, because it was this little kind of jiggy melody that went all through it, joining up all of the Gershwin pieces. So there's my secret, my deadly secret, don't tell Gershwin. And there was another one. I'd been walking through the woods in Germany and had heard for the first time a cuckoo. And I was just walking for half an hour through this wood, and this cuckoo was following me. And I'd never heard a cuckoo. Cook, 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 cook. And then we think of them as having a single interval, but this one had more than one interval. It had not a minor third, which is often what we think of as the cuckoo song, but major third, and also a fourth. And I thought, this is a weird cuckoo. But then I went and did some research later on and found that they actually do fifths, which explains Couperin's song about the cuckoos, which has got all fourths and fifths. And I thought, this is not cuckoos, but they were French cuckoos who have fourths and fifths. So, you know, the pieces all had origins in different areas like that. One was again, a bird. A lot of my piano pieces have been about birds because you can copy them so well. I was in the garden here, and we've got this long, thin section that goes all the way up the hill, and at the top we've got about 24 forest giants on the section. And in August and in about January, February, we have grey warblers, and the grey warblers sing. And the ones here all have the same tune. Or, of course, a couple of octaves higher. And then they do various different patterns. And so the Grey Warbler song went into the book. It was composed just of the music that they sang, totally, just simply writing down what they sang, nothing else beyond piling up some of the sounds to make one or two chords. So yeah, Jack Jiggs was part of that set. Of course, Ludwig Treviranus played it, and he's one of the most delightful of students that I've ever had, who's done so well. So beginning as a very young little Samoan boy with his wide open eyes, and watching him grow and helping him with his piano music, and then he comes back and helps me with my projects and plays my pieces, and it's been a terrific two-way relationship, because he's turned into a fine pianist who's playing around the world now.